morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are about to start with our program shortly. Just a few announcements. In addition to the email that we sent you with the program, if you can just go to the conference website, you will be able to access the full final program as well as the book of abstracts. So all those are available on the conference website. So we apologize for starting a little bit late, but we are all set now to start. In terms of the program, for the welcoming and opening, we will be calling on stage Dr. Makua, who is the acting DVC for Teaching and Learning at MUT and the conference chair. Doc, if you are ready, you may come to the stage and welcome all of us. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure once again to welcome you to this Teaching with Technology Summit 2023. Before I continue with my opening address, I would like to formally welcome everyone here, from colleagues from MUT and colleagues from other institutions in the country. I'm sure as the program continues, we will share the names of the institutions that are in attendance today. Okay, I'm told that closer to the mic. I just don't want it to keep me away from you. Okay. Don't make it so obvious. I'm sure I'm sure you'll be able to hear me very well. Dr. Seale is laughing. I'm sure he'll be the victim of the same. Let me welcome Dr. Seale with his team. I'm sure you will introduce your team when you get on stage. The team is from Higher Education Leadership Management. Did I say the acronym right? HELM. We will know HELM from the many messages that we receive on the various programs that they run across the higher education sector. Many times we meet online and we talk online, but we just thought that let's meet face to face and get to experience what you always do with us online in various platforms. I am sure that Dr. Seale, the team has already told you about the conference that we hold annually. And it will be a pleasure to cooperate with you even beyond this summit into the conference. So the conference is a much bigger event, and we definitely would like you to to come to the conference. I'm not sure if they've shared the dates with you, but they will share the dates with you. This is actually a precursor to our conference, and this year we will be celebrating our 10th year anniversary. So it's going to be big, and we would like you and your team to visit our shows again. I'm told here in attendance we have colleagues from Northwest University. We also have colleagues from CPUT. We have attendees from Umgeni Water. That's good to have you around. I mean, in a summit like this, I'm impressed. Then we have colleagues from Tshwane University of Technology and University South Africa. Obviously, we have colleagues from UKZN. We have colleagues from the University of Pretoria. We have colleagues from the University of Limpopo, my alma mater. We have colleagues from UFS, University of Free State. We have colleagues from UNISA, Vaal University of Technology, University of Venda, University of Western Cape. Wow. You're welcome. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. Wow, that's an impressive representation, Dr. Seale. You can see that we have influence. Thank you so much, colleagues, for coming to Durban. And I'm also extending that invitation to you to show up in August when we host the conference. And I am sure you will. Many of you have already indicated that you definitely would like to come. The conference will be at Zimbali in the north of Durban, the iconic, the capital. And then we have our sponsors and partners. Here I have One Connect, and obviously the Department of Higher Education, and HELM is also represented. So we appreciate the cooperation and the collaboration that we enjoy from the colleagues and the organizations that I have mentioned. In brief, colleagues, let me just say that the Teaching with Technology Summit was initially launched in 2016 as an e-learning seminar for academics at MUT with the aim of promoting the adoption and use of technologies in higher education. Over time, the event evolved, and in 2018, access to the summit was opened to other colleagues in the higher education sector. Colleagues, you can come through even as I speak. It's okay for me, you won't disrupt me. The summit has a history of attracting distinguished national and international scholars in areas such as e-learning, e-pedagogies, and instructional design. In 2021, the flagship summit event was hosted online, as you will know, because of the pandemic, and drew over 100 delegates in attendance. The event featured the likes of Punya Mishra, those of you will know him from TIPAC, and Diane Lorilat. Both of them, in their own right, are distinguished experts in the field. And they also promised that when things settle, they would like to feature on our programs physically, and we will hold them to that. As we gather today, we do so on the backdrop of very recent and unprecedented changes that punctuate higher education the world over. The scramble to respond to the challenges imposed by the pandemic have left us wiser. It is for this reason, ladies and gentlemen, that we cannot afford to continue doing business as usual. It will be folly to do this. I always say the time to install a fire extinguisher in a house is not when a house is on fire. It is before the fire breaks out, if you want to cash in and leverage on its benefits. This is exactly what happened in 2020. At this stage, my main worry is that institutions may consciously or unconsciously navigate back to dispositions held prior to the pandemic. If this happens, it will be unfortunate. You would know, for instance, that the World Economic Forum's 2022 report on the future of jobs highlighted a few things that should capture our attention. The pace of technology adoption is expected to remain unabated and may accelerate in some areas. And the second point is that the skills gaps continue to be high as in-demand skills across jobs change in the next few years. And also that online learning and training is on the rise, but workers has become increasingly shorter. It is within this challenging context, ladies and gentlemen, that the 2023 Teaching with Technology Summit is appropriately themed 21st Century Skills, Predicting the Future of Online Learning and Teaching. Our challenge as institutions is to reskill and upskill our students and the workforce so that we can all be equipped to prepare students for a world that we cannot yet imagine, where technology will play an even greater role than it does today. Earlier this week, at the same hotel, but in the other complex, I opened the Cisco conference, which dealt with different issues, mainly also around technology. I asked a pertinent question in my opening address related to the high rate of unemployment in South Africa. I asked if in South Africa we have an unemployment or an unemployability problem. It's something you can think about. It is pressing challenges as these that should convince those of us who are able to champion and lead change to do so tirelessly. What can you expect from the conference or from this summit? At this summit, ladies and gentlemen, I am sure we will explore the many ways in which technology is transforming teaching and learning in the 21st century. During the 2 days, we will have presentations and workshops focusing on areas such as online learning design, open educational resources, e-learning support enablers, student voices and experiences. We'll discuss the skills that both lecturers and students need to thrive in a world that is increasingly interconnected, data-driven, and reliant on digital technologies. Let me quickly navigate to my closing points. As we begin the summit, let us remember that our ultimate goal is to prepare our students for a world, as I said, that is constantly and consistently evolving. Therefore, we must be adaptable, agile, and willing to learn new skills ourselves. I always say, if you don't read, you can't lead, because you get marginalized by development. And if you have leadership that is not conversant with current contextual challenges that face higher education, then you have irrelevant leadership that is unable to understand what it is that our academics need, what it is that our lecture halls need, and what it is that our students need, because they are seized with priorities that have very little to do with what our students require to make it beyond the walls of the university. I am confident, ladies and gentlemen, that this summit will provide us with the platform, tools, and inspiration we need to meet these challenges and to create a brighter future, not only for our students, but ourselves as well. Some of the points that I would like to leave you with are: 1, we should continue to interrogate our understandings of what constitutes learning and how this can be facilitated. We should continue to rethink and redesign our learning environments and spaces. Should continue to encourage our institutions to invest unfailingly in enabling state-of-the-art infrastructure. Let us continue to rethink what we teach students, that is the curriculum that we offer as higher education institutions, and not continue to be stuck with things we used to do 10 years ago and think that those things are still relevant even today. Let us continue to conceptualize ways in which we can facilitate access and success to higher education. And lastly, we should think of ourselves and our students as global citizens. If we do this, we will consciously pursue impactful ways in which teaching and learning can occur for the purpose of producing globally competent students who can hold their own out there. Best wishes for the summit, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. Makua, for. Thank you, Doc. At the moment, we shall call upon to the stage Dr. Oliver to give us the keynote address. Doc, the stage is yours.
Come on, you can do better than that. We're in Durban and it's a beautiful sunny day. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Great. I'm happy you're there and I'm happy to be here. I was telling the team from HELM, who I haven't seen in 2 years in person. It's weird. It's like we were living in COVID in a parallel universe. You know, we just saw each other on the screen. And at least for a change, we could now all get dressed up and look good, because we had somewhere to go. So it's good to be here and good to be with you in person for this really exciting event. I must really express my deepest appreciation event. I'm also not on my own. I brought the rest of the pack with me from HELM. HELM is Higher Education Leadership and Management at Universities South Africa, USAF, not UNISA, not the University of South Africa. It's USAF, University South Africa. And I'm joined by my, who are at the back, Cindy Kai, who is our Senior Manager for Student Success, and our 2 associates, Rassi Low, and then Dr. Juliet Stoltenkamp. And you'll meet them tomorrow when they present the workshop to you. So it's good to be here, and Aren, we appreciate the opportunity. I was planning transformation in higher education, but because those of you who know me, I'm in leadership and management, and I really appreciate what Dr. Makua said about the type of leaders required for the 21st century university. completely different. And if truth be told, some of us in the executive leadership in our universities have been found wanting. So what are we going to talk about today? I've got about 40 minutes. I don't want to stand between you and your tea time, so I want to respect the time. But I really want to just provide you with some context for where we are. Dr. Makua said, the world as we know it has changed dramatically in the last 3 years or so. I think what also worries me of deep concern, I've been in higher education at a kind of national level, institutional level, I worked at various universities, is as a system post-94, we almost seem to get stuck in crisis mode. We lurch from one crisis to the next, and I think we had just been, we've just started dealing with the impact and implications of Fees Must Fall towards the end of 2018, and then COVID happened. So I think certainly in our universities, and I'll talk a bit about that in a moment, the world has become more challenging and more complex. And I think that's the key things that are happening today, and as I'm saying, I'll talk about that. So what's happening globally? Changes, if we see, for example, I mean, it's sad to see that the war in Ukraine has been going on for more than a year now. We thought it was going to be short conflict which would be resolved. And it impacts on our global economies. But besides the wars, so the ongoing conflict on the continent, Nigeria, DRC, in Syria, in Palestine. So the conflicts that are happening and influencing us, whether we are not affected as South Africans, it does affect us in one way or another, and especially in relation to our economy, especially the sense pushback from the continent to what's happening in the global north. We're seeing a shift from the north, the global north, dominating the knowledge domain. We talk about the growth in the world population. They say 20% is in Africa by 2030. I know as long as I can remember, as long as I've been involved with universities, as long as I've worked in government, and we talked about Africa, we've been referred to as the sleeping giant. And I pray for at one point, that's my prayer every day, that we'll wake up at some point as a continent and own our space in the global arena. The slide towards anti-intellectual is deep concern for us in universities. Why? You have a president, a former president in the US, that just discarded whatever the scientists had to say about COVID. And you see the impact. It was the number of people who died in the US. You could equate that to a genocide. And nobody took the US on because it was the great and almighty USA. If that was happening in the continent or in another part of the developing world, it would have created major global issues. Because, and we saw that fortunately in South Africa, we listened to the scientists, we listened to the intellectuals, we heeded their calls, and we took note of what they had to say. Global warming, I mean, we see it every day, impact of climate change on the continent, what it means to various countries, the natural disasters, which are frequent and much more intense, mass consumption, COVID-19 pandemic, I think we all know about it. COVID is still here, it's alive and well, still around, so don't think COVID has left us. I think it's something that, like with HIV/AIDS and other pandemics, is here to stay. And then I think the other development is 4IR and the disruptive impact of new technologies, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Now it's interesting, in typical Mzansi way, so we had a problem with technology-mediated learning, and suddenly 4IR was going to save us. Everyone got on the 4IR bandwagon and said, yeah, if we do this and that and put the strategy in place and get us into the fourth. I don't even know if we got through the third industrial revolution in Mzansi yet. And then we were suddenly in the fourth, industrial revolution, and we're like, what just happened here? And I think it's these quick fix solutions which politicians are the worst for. I mean, they read something in a magazine while they're sitting on a plane, or they see something somewhere else working in Singapore or New Zealand, and they say, oh, that would be a great idea. We must be very wary of that. 4IR is not the savior. 4IR is not the magic bullet. I think what Dr. Makua is referring to is we've got to go back to basics. And in technology, in the technology moment, teaching and learning, we've got to get the basics right. And that's where we need to start. So this is our world, colleagues. Technology, students are becoming more aware, and I suppose much better at social media than we are. I think they really they beat us in Fees Must Fall. We were catching up all the time as executives, as leaders in higher education, and I think the world post-fallism, or still in fallism, is changing dramatically, and then you add to that this problem, the issues that we're still facing, and the fallout that we're facing from COVID, and its impact in the shift to technology-mediated learning and digital transformation. Some of the issues I want to just talk about, and I'm not going to spend too much time because I know this is really around what are we doing in technology, what are we doing in technology-mediated learning, what are we doing in the space of digital transformation, what does it mean for us as a country? And more importantly, I think, what does it mean for us in USAF and HELM and how we're approaching this? So, transformation, student campaigns, it's still there. Free education hasn't gone away. Fees Must Fall, it's still brewing, it's there. It's in a space, I think we saw episodic interventions, activities happening at some of the universities, and we kind of know that by now. We're planning for those protests because the issue of access and finance remains a major issue for our students. And in some universities, some of them are 80% dependent on NSFAS funding for their student bodies. So it remains a crisis, the funding model for universities. I think it's also a proxy for what's going on in the country generally, and what worries one is how the students' behavior in our universities mirror what's happening in our communities when people are upset or dissatisfied with service delivery, and they decide the only way someone is going to come and talk to us, Sheriff Seale is going to ride into town and come and address us, is if we burn down the library or the clinic. Otherwise, they will just ignore us. And I think that, for us, is a big concern. Polarization of student politics, I think that remains an issue, the impact it has on student governments. And then also the management-staff relationships. I think you see this at this time of protest, and how that impacts on the relationships between, and the trust relationship between the management and the students at universities. And our universities have to be, the nature of the universities is a space, a free space for thought, a free space for debate, and a space that encourages diverse voices. And that's what we're not seeing. We're seeing a culture of intolerance, where it's not, I think it was Bishop Tutu said, don't raise your voice in an argument, make the argument better. Offer a better argument, not your voice. And I think that's what we're seeing, and I think as intellectual, as academic institutions, we're losing some of that in the way we do things. Funding, I think we all know, I don't want to spend too much time there, but we all know we're underfunded. I think the debate has been, as long as I can remember, I was part of the team, I was interim CEO at USAF when we met with President Zuma then, and there was talk about, a fee-free higher education sector. Ultimately, it was a situation where someone has to foot the bill, whether it's the taxpayers, whether it's partly by the students and their families. But the challenge is that you cannot get into a situation where it's a free education without someone having to pick up the bill. Now, what we saw with Fees Must Fall was not the disadvantaged students or the students that qualify for NSFAS funding, because they were essentially covered by that component of the funding model. It was the middle class students who fell out of NSFAS, who couldn't afford, whose parents were ordinary civil servants, police, nurses, and the fees that they had to pay at the universities were just becoming astronomical. Third stream income has increased, but again, with COVID and the implications of funding, a lot of the funders are withdrawing from some of these projects, so it's becoming more and more challenge. NSFAS allocations on the increase, probably the biggest that it's been ever, and so one has to congratulate the department for providing that support, but it's still, I mean, the takeout here, it's not enough, and a number of universities are sitting with huge historical debt that they're trying to sort out. Student access and success, so I think we need to increase the participation rate. I think what we saw with the technology-mediated learning or digital transformation was the possibility of increasing access, but we still had those issues of students being excluded because they didn't have access to data, or they didn't have devices, or for example, when they did, they couldn't in the areas that they live, and especially in some of the rural areas and the informal areas, there was a lack of very poor connectivity. But I think this is a statistic, the 55% that we need to remain concerned about. And I really get worried when some big universities, take as many first-year students as possible, knowing those students are not going to make it. So they're setting them up for failure. And I think it's a moral injustice for our students. Most of them come from poor, marginalized, disadvantaged backgrounds, and they are the hope of their families to make a career, to make something of their lives. And then we set them up for failure in some of these universities because they just don't have a chance to make it. It's more about the quantum and less about the quality. So that's a message that we really need to take in. And I think we need to look at that number and work towards increasing that over time. Our research and postgraduate studies, it's all there. There's a challenge. I think the takeout here is, I don't know if any of you heard of the National Development Plan. NDP? Yes, NDP, yes. And 2030, she's coming. And no one talks about NDP anymore. We've got other crises, we've got other issues that we're grappling with in our universities. We kind of refer to NDP when we put out stats and we say, well, this is what we're hoping to produce and this is where we are. Some of those targets were just not attainable from the outset. I think it was very ambitious, and I love it when we are ambitious as South Africans. We always are people of hope, we're ambitious, but we also have to be pragmatic and realistic. And I think that is something that we need to. So the other area of challenge remains in our universities, although we've made quite a big increase from 30-something% around 2012, 2013. There are 46% of our academics, so we're almost close to 50%. But you see, the NDP target is 75%. We're not going to make that by 2030 at the current rate. And of course, the way we structure PhDs and how people do PhDs, it's also the model itself is problematic. I need to move on. Epistemological, I need to go back. Epistemological transformation, I think decolonization, all of those things Dr. Makua talked about, the way we did things 10 years ago, the curriculum has to change. I'm really concerned, colleagues, about our students. Now often, people who want to quote how well we do as universities in their performance metrics, they say, well, graduates, less than 10% of graduates are unemployed in the country. It's massive. You see the statistics for youth unemployment. It's huge, and that's the future. It's scary. And then we say, yeah, but university graduates, only 10%. But often we don't interrogate that statistic because within that 10%, you ask yourself, how many of those students are actually doing the jobs that they were qualified for in the university with the degrees that they awarded? Often they end up doing other jobs. They get those jobs in administration or doing something else because they have a qualification, because they have a higher, they've been exposed to university and they have a better understanding of how the world works, especially in the world of work. But what we're not doing, as Dr. Makua alluded to, is preparing our students for a changing world of work. It's no longer business as usual, folks. It's just not going to happen. And the sooner we get into a sense where we need to empower our students and enable them to make a contribution to the economy, and also, especially, to become job creators and not merely job takers. The formal economy is almost stagnant. So it's not growing sufficiently to absorb our graduates. So we have to kind of improve our collective thinking on that. And so we need to find ways where that connection, that compact between society and our universities are strengthened. Next generation of academics, those of you academics here, we have a potential crisis. Are we attracting young, black, aspiring, smart intellectuals into our academy? Are we? Yes? No? Maybe? I don't think so. Because what we do is we offer them the worst salary, the worst working conditions. We offer them the workspace, the worst workplaces to work in, and then we expect them to thrive. So I think it's something that we need to do as a collective, but also work through the pipeline of those who need to end up in the professoriate. We need to get the demographics right. It's looking better, but we still need to work on ensuring that we get to those targets we ourselves set, and ensure that there's more demographic representation, but especially in terms of gender equity, in terms of the academic and the administration staff in our universities. So diversifying the academy, ensuring there's adequate funding for those initiatives. We have, I think, the programs that were introduced by the DHET, NGAP and others are fantastic, but they're really just a drop in the ocean, so we need to really work at that. Differentiation is also a key national issue, a challenge that's come for us since the beginning in the last 2 decades, post-democracy. I think it's a case where often I said to colleagues earlier, the HELM team, as I get older, I become less diplomatic and less tolerant. Unfortunately, I'm not working in university, so if I say something to a vice chancellor, it can't be career limiting. So I think often we thought that the way we get better or we become good or we become noted is we become more like UCT or WITS or one of the top 5, top 6, whatever they call them. And I worry, and I think Dr. Makua alluded to this. What worried me, and still worries me, is the fact that during, and my colleagues from HELM, especially Dr. Stoltenkamp, can allude to that, or will allude to that, how our universities, when they were caught in that technology moment and had to react, the knee-jerk response to technology-mediated learning in lockdown, how they collaborated in those first 2 years. It was amazing. I mean, they shared documents, they shared strategies. I mean, the whole teaching and learning community was like one big brotherhood and sisterhood, and cooperating and collaborating for the greater good. Some of the universities, I mean, would already done online learning, were ready, could shift. Obviously, it was the quantum of that shift. Others were not even on the field, never mind in the game. And that was the problem of where you sat in the spectrum of how our universities were affected by that. But sadly, and I say this sadly, as soon as lockdown was over and we went back to our kind of face-to-face, then we were all playing the ranking games again. I'm better than you, and you better than me, and I can do this better than you can, and so on and so forth. And I think we went back and fell back into that competitive mode. So I think our task as a collective, and I'm glad that we have representation here from different universities, not just from MUT, is to work collaboratively in the interest of our sector. This really is a national project. It's not an institutional or individual approach that. So I think we can get over this thing of differentiation, where in specific areas or needs, which is in the national interest, we can collaborate with each other. Now this is just what I'm coming to, the new technology moment, and I think this is what the conversations are going to be about, and it's been going on about for some time. So universities are knowledge enterprise, so they're at the heart of this new technology moment. I think the way things have developed in the last couple of years, it's remarkable to see the impact and the strides, the great strides that have been done in technology. But it comes with some caveats. It has all of these. We can't ignore the fact that what's happening out there, what's happening globally, what's happening in other university systems is going to impact on us. It's already impacting on us and has impacted on us in South Africa. So I think if you adopt approach, as I said to someone the other day, you have to think of yourself as an African and not an Africant. So be an African, not an Africant, where you see the opportunity in the challenge, as opposed to, I think, and I'd be loath not to say that we're facing issues, social issues, economic issues in our countries. Everyone's at an all-time low. Every time you turn on the TV, I don't even watch the news anymore because it's not good. It's funny also, I mean, I always think of myself, how do we allow mediocrity to become the norm? How do we allow that? Incompetence is the norm. So then you see this morning I was watching the news on ENCA, and then I think the chair of ESCOM, the board says, yeah, we mustn't complain about the fact that we're now in stage 2. We should be happy that we're no longer in stage 4. We'll be happy if there's no load shedding. Thank you very much. You know, so I think that mindset, but I think out of that, I think what's been very encouraging is how as South Africans, we've learned to cope with the crisis of energy and electricity, but it's still there. And unless we deal with something like we're dealing with the technology moment, it's going to trip us up at some point. I think also the relationships between, I think this interdisciplinary work is still lacking in our universities. The hard sciences still do their own thing, the human sciences do their own thing. So I think in that space, there's certainly an opportunity for greater collaboration. And what technology does, I think, is allow you to get people from different spaces, different places. I was really amazed because I belong to an organization called the International Leadership Association, the ILA, based in the US. And they asked me to get involved with a task team, and it's all voluntary work that we do on education, leadership education guidelines. And we sat in this meeting online, and there I was with colleagues from the US. There was a colleague from Brazil. There was a colleague from Japan. There was a colleague from Australia, a colleague in the UK. It was amazing. We would never have been able to achieve that unless we were all coming to an international conference, you know. But other than that, I think that was the opportunity where technology allowed us to level the playing field in terms of us having access to each other and having an opportunity to engage with each other. What's the implication of the new technology moment? Obviously for research and innovation, AI and robotics. We see this all the time, what's happening in countries, how people are using data analytics. I mean, data analytics, it's not new. I was just talking to Rassi earlier, and he was saying he was in the US at Georgia State University, GSU, one of the top universities in the world around data analytics. And what they've been doing is starting to use the system, building it again, Dr. Makua, through leadership, visionary, committed leadership that took this on as a challenge, said it took them 10 years to get there, but they are. They're now in a point where they're using their data as intelligence to help them with their students that come from difficult and disadvantaged backgrounds. But, as Rassi reminded me, it's not a deficit model, so they just don't focus on the high-risk students. They focus on all the students. It's a model which is developmental and progressive. So a lot of that work is already out there, and I think we should be looking at those models. Now, I'm the first to say, yeah, well, you know, US, they're always better, bigger, they do things smarter, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, what was interesting, and I met the colleagues from Georgia State University, they were in South Africa a couple of years ago. What was interesting, the profile of their students at risk almost mirrored the profile of our students. And that was the interesting. So they knew exactly what they were talking about in the way they were dealing with this issue. And using data, predictive analytics, using data then to make as intelligence can help them. They saw a progression, I think, over an increase of their throughput rate, over 50% from that number in that 10 years, just because they intervened and supported their students through data analytics. So it is there, I think. There's also an opportunities for leadership. I think Dr. Makua mentioned that. I think some of our executives, when COVID came and we had to move to technology, we kind of sort of hid our head in the sand, hoping that it will just go away, you know, like everything else, and it didn't. I think the leadership, and I think often in this case, I'm an advocate for collective leadership. I'm an advocate for team leadership. Because the days of the Vice Chancellor being the hero and the Lone Ranger out there just dragging everyone along to his or her vision are gone. The smart leaders, it still applies. The smart leaders surround themselves by smarter people. So sometimes you lead from the front, sometimes you lead from the back, sometimes you lead in the middle. Because there are smarter people than you that can lead in that particular area or in that particular initiative than you can. So the sooner you cop that, the better. There's also a shift, I think, particularly in the Australian education system, where they really now starting to research this notion of distributed and collective leadership, where a team, like you would in teaching and learning, takes responsibility for digital transformation or technology-mediated learning. Then the unbundling of our education. Now, yeah, you know, they talk about the digital university and everything's going to be online, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's like 4IR. We say things and we say, yeah, 4IR is going to save us. Yeah, go 4IR, go 4IR. I think we do the same with the digital university. We think the digital university, it ain't, folks. The reality is we've got to go back to basics. Technology is there to support, but you can't get away from the pedagogy and the content. You can have the best technology in the world, but if your pedagogy and your content stinks, forget it. Don't go there. And I think that is sometimes the trap that we fall in. And then, of course, MOOCs and SOOCs and all of this stuff that's online. I was at WITS at the time, and everybody's saying, MOOCs is the future, and let's get on to MOOCs and blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, we look at what's happening in the rest of the world. Now, of course, when you're sitting in the UK, in the US, or Sweden, where you got fantastic connectivity, and you kind of got a good job, and you're kind of doing this MOOC thing to enhance, and it's fine, you can do it after hours, and you use that to enhance your profession or to grow your skills, that's all good. But you can't use MOOCs to get students through a graduate program. It ain't gonna work. You can't use SOOCs to get students, say, okay, why don't we just put this stuff online and MOOCify it? And that's good. It's not gonna work. I think what's always important in these initiatives, and these fads, I call it, is the contextual specificities. As a leader, you always have to be aware of the context. And that's key. If you're not, you're going to fall. And then, of course, other initiatives like the blockchain university. COVID-19, I spoke about that. I say at best our responses to COVID and lockdown was knee-jerk, reactive. I think we didn't know what to do. Most of our universities, we hadn't seen this coming. And suddenly we were there. We had to make decisions. And kudos to the leadership in most universities who took up the challenge. I think at a leadership level, what we saw at USAP, the vice-chancellors were talking to each other and collaborating with each other for a change in the interest of the common good. So that was something really good. I think, and I stand corrected, and I think my colleagues, when they do the workshop with you tomorrow morning, that we've got better over the 2-3 years. We've got better at technology-mediated learning. We're not there yet. But I think we've got to find ways of what the future, so collectively look at what the future is going to look like post-COVID. Now, of course, people were talking about, remember the conversations during COVID is like a new normal. Remember that? There's a new normal. And then after 2 years of like all of this new normal, we're like, but what's normal? You know, what's normal? And so I think we're in a space where everything is up for grabs, everything is changing. I say when I talk about leadership in HELM, when we do our HELM programs, there are two. We still talk about one constant in the days of ticking over in our universities, and that was change. The constant there, a decade or so ago, in all universities globally, was change. Now we've got two: change and complexity. So we still have change, but the world in which we live and operate as universities are becoming more and more complex. And that's one of the lessons we need to learn. And I think that what COVID did was help us get through those challenges. I think the particular challenge around technology-mediated learning and digital transformation is the potential of widening the gap, where students really grappled. I mean, and we saw that. Cases of students having data, they had their tools, they had the instruments, they had their laptops, but there's no connectivity. And that didn't help anyone. So, and that's something we couldn't do as universities. We were not the business of putting up cell phone towers and so on. So I think those lessons are still with us. So now what are we doing in ULEFU? Now ULEFU is the acronym for University Learning Futures. ULEFU comes out of a discussion we've been having at USAV and HELM on how to support our HDIs in particular. I think I mentioned earlier that the Big Five, Big Six, and maybe some of the other universities in that space were probably better positioned to take on technology-mediated learning. But I say that under correction, because some universities like UWC, from which Dr. Stoltenkamp comes, were in a better place, in a better space. They were already experimenting in that space. We need to look at ways of supporting our HDIs, and fortunately, through funding that we got from the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust, seed funding, not a big amount, we were able to start the ULEFU project. And you'll see in a moment what that's. So, started out with understanding what the contexts are. We start with engagements, Dr. Makua and his team and others. We talked to the DVCs at all the other universities. It was fascinating for us to get an understanding and appreciation for what was going on at the proverbial chalk face and what the day-to-day experience of academics, of those leading in teaching and learning space was in relation to technology-mediated learning. And there were challenges, big challenges. I think where we were about a year or two ago when we started has changed, but still there are issues around infrastructure. I did some work for one of the universities in, I won't mention the university's name, but they're in central South Africa. And they have a campus in Bloemfontein, and they've got a campus in another site. They won't mention them. And I asked myself, when I went to the satellite campus, I asked if I was a student at this campus, would I have the same experience as if I was at the main campus? No. And especially when it came to technology-mediated learning. Often, when I used to go there for meeting with the stakeholders around this project, they would say to me, well, it's load shedding, so we can't talk now. We can't go online. So those basic things that, I mean, again, we need to go back to basics and put that. So we're not there yet. But I think we need to find ways to get the fundamentals in place and work on that. I talked about what COVID did. What COVID did, and I think people like Dr. Stoltenkamp and others who are, Dr. Gumede, who's in the teaching and learning space, said, hallelujah, at last they get it, the academics, that technology can work. You know, we can use technology to put our programs online. So there was certainly a shift. That was a big positive, where suddenly our lecturers couldn't still continue teaching with their 10, 15, 20-year-old notes, talking heads all the time to their students. Now they had to get into the technology-mediated space. What we're trying to do is really improve our skills development for the HDIs. We really want to try and get the HDIs onto a level playing field with some of the other universities. Now, it's a moving target, but I think it's one of those initiatives that you've got to start somewhere. I, as my colleagues will know, I'm visionary, I'm a strategist, but I also qualify that by saying I'm a pragmatist and a realist. It's important to know what you would like to do, but it's equally important to know what you actually can do. So we're taking this on, and we're really confident to see where we are with the level. Currently, we've made some major strides. The fact that we're here today, sharing with you at this fantastic event where we are and what our vision is for technology-mediated learning and what we're trying to achieve, is tantamount. I think it is an indication of where we're going, and we're not there yet. So I think for me that's an exciting space to be. I think also to help our students, it's important. So online teaching pedagogies, I know all the universities have problem with the online assessments. I mean, we all struggle with that in the beginning. We get smarter now. Of course, we think we get smarter, but guess what? Our students are even smarter. So as you put that new technology in place, they're out there already finding ways and means to get around it. So you've got to have ahead of the game. I think it's not about playing a game around technology and you trying to beat. It's about trust. If you trust the process, you ensure that you get the best result. And I think that's where we probably, with our students, need to understand there's a responsibility on their part to do the right thing at the right time. And I think that's something. So we're going to be doing that. We're already working on some of that stuff. And Cindy is here, and Cindy can share with you as colleagues what we're trying to do. For example, we know all our universities now have policies in this space, have strategies on teaching and learning, and we want to find ways of collating that. Ultimately, we want to kind of end up with a how-to guide. Now, there's an interesting document, which I'll share with you, Dr. Gumede, which you can share with the colleagues. A very interesting document called a Registrar's Handbook, which is in open space. The registrars themselves took it upon themselves to develop a document that they can use on student administration, on governance, and they all contributed a chapter, made a contribution. It's a fantastic case study, how-to, toolkit, combination. That's what we're trying to get to in technology-mediated learning. It's an evolutionary process, and Rassi, our technology genius, Rassi Lowe, is working on, please, he's going to sign you all up for our peer learning community. Sign up. It's going to be on Canvas. It's free. You can have access to those resources. That we're trying to do in Ulevi. So when we develop, it's kind of in the open educational resource modality, where we develop what we can because we get funding from the public fiscus or from donors, and that becomes a free resource or public service. So that's what we're going to do. Then also a practice zone, teaching and learning. So I think I want to take up with Dr. Makua and Dr. Gumede, experimenting, for example, with the team at MUT as an exemplar of what we can do in that zone for both the staff and the students. We'd also probably want to look at another university that we could use as a case study. I believe we have got the skill sets. We've got fantastic people. And of course, as I mentioned, the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust said we could use the skill set from other universities that they've been funding, like WITS, like Free State and others. And I know Free State has been doing some amazing work in this space. Francois Strydom, who was the head of the teaching and learning, or head of teaching and learning in that university, and the center that they had. It's done amazing work, especially on low bandwidth access for students who struggle, for example, with connectivity, how they get access to the. So we will collaborate in that space. And again, being here today, Dr. Makua and Dr. Gamedi, we want to strengthen the partnership with MUT in the benefit of all the HDIs, but also for the sector as a whole. And especially, I think what is really cool, because MUT is a TOT, technology, University of UOT, University of Technology. We can try and find ways in how we can contextualize what we do, that case study, in other UOTs in the system. So PLC, that's our peer learning community, and Rashi will talk about that tomorrow in his workshop. I think the one thing we've learned from COVID is there's a need to learn, and there's a need to share. Now, Dr. Makua, when you talk about leadership, you get me going and I can't stop. The one thing that we don't do as leaders, not just in the executive, for us in HELM, everyone is a leader. Everyone has a potential for leadership in their own space. What we don't do in our university leadership environment is reflect. We don't step back and ask, why did we do that? How did we do it? Can we do it better? And then equally important, we don't learn. So use the opportunities, and this is where the PLC is a common platform, a space where you can talk to colleagues. At some point you will be able to engage. We will facilitate some webinars, online events for that space. But there's going to be some fantastic resources. Rassi was sharing with me the experience he had in the US, in the online learning consortium, that there's a lot of stuff going on globally that we could benefit from as USAF, as HELM, but then also you at the chalk face within your university. So that PLC is happening. I need to end up. So this is my second last slide. So Cindy, this is the implementation plan that we put together as a team. You'll see digital transformation, the grounding principles, which we'll develop, digital literacy and capacity development, which will be ongoing. The intention is to enable and empower universities to do it for themselves. So when we're no longer here 5 years from now, you actually have embedded that into your institutions, and you're working institutionally, but also preferably working on these issues regionally. Assessment toolkits, and I think that's something that we have to continue. And again, we can defer to global or international good practice. Policy and guides, frameworks. So although you may have your own policy and framework in place, it's good to see what others are doing and perhaps how, because again, it's an evolution. It's still new. I mean, our whole digital transformation technology moment space, it's less than 3 years old. So it's good to again, at some point, step back and reflect. And then I think this is why we knowledge institutions. Folks, we can't get away from the scholarship. Whatever we do in this space, I say the same in leadership, in management, whatever we do must be informed by evidence. So we have to spend time on research, and we have to spend time on scholarship. Here's an opportunity for us, and this is the challenge I'm putting to MUT and the leadership team here, is to own that space. Because your situation, your context is unique. If you can tell your story, who knows, 10 years from now, you could be the Georgia State University here in KZN. You could be the exemplar for other universities in the region and other universities on the continent. So that is the challenge to you. That's my final slide. I wish that you may remain tenacious, that you remain resolute. I often, when we do our leadership events in HELM, I say the university is not about the vice-chancellor. And with respect, Dr. Makua, about the deputy vice-chancellors, about the registrar. It's about you. You are the university. Without the academy, There's no university. You may as well close down and say, that's it, the end, folks. Good night and God bless. You need to stay in the trenches. You need to enable yourself. You need to empower yourself so that you can empower your students who look to you to help them achieve their dreams and their future for their families. So thank you once again, Dr. Makua and Dr. Gumedi, for the opportunity. Unfortunately, I will leave you at the end of today, but I'll still be here. I'm going to be around. I can't be here tomorrow. You know, the emails always find you no matter where you are. So the work goes on back in head office. But I'm just happy to be here, to be in Durban, to be away from the office. I think it's a space where we can engage. Please, my plea to you is invest in this time. Invest in yourself. Take the time to just declutter. Get rid of the distractions of what's happening back in the office and back in your lecture room. Spend the time here, invest, so that you can reflect, and hopefully, out of these 2 days, you will learn something new. Or if not, you'll meet somebody that can help you address a problem that you may be facing also. So good luck. All the best for the rest of the event. Again, it's an honor, and we look forward to working with you, Dr. Makua and Dr. Gumedi, on the planning for your conference later this year. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Oliver. Just before you sit down, colleagues, I realized that I will do a terrible job to summarize his keynote address. So what we will do, we will take a few questions and comments from the floor and engage him before he sits down. If we have got any questions based on on his keynote address, yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was wonderful and well received. This is Nati Madondo from MUT, TLDC. A bit of a comment and a question. So it seems to me that because of technology, universities are now becoming sites for money making. In the sense that these technologies, they change, they keep on changing, over time, and universities have to adapt and buy and subscribe, to these companies. And so, which then brings the question of, to me, the purpose of higher education. Why are we in the space of higher education? For others in the space, the assumption is that, well, we teach students so that they can acquire certificates to get the job, informed by knowledge economy, at this point in time. And for others is to teach students so that they become, pushing the boundaries of the field, to become researchers. In that, all those things have implications for pedagogy. And I appreciated the fact that you touched on pedagogy. Now, the struggle for me is, my inclination or my orientation is more towards enabling students to become researchers, because for a strong postgraduate, you need strong undergraduate, so you can't have a strong postgraduate without a strong undergraduate. And so it means we need to develop the identity of the student. We need to work at identity level, not only on content level. And so how do we do this in the context of technology? Because now we end up teaching technology, not teaching with technology. So these are some of the struggles that I sometimes face, in my engagement. Maybe you might have some light, and of course it's for colleagues and everyone. Thank you.
Very good question, and I think it's such a good question. I'll leave it to my colleagues, the smart, the team. No, I'm just being facetious. I think you hit the nail on the head, because university life is an intellectual endeavor. And as soon as there's a commercial dimension to it, I mean, I think we all talk about university education being a public good. We all subscribe to that. We claim to. But we saw that. You're right. I think even now, I mean, people now that at USAF and people know in the technology, media, I get every other week, I get an email from saying, I'm so-and-so, or on LinkedIn, I'm so-and-so, I've got this product and I want to sell you this thing. So you've got to be very conscious of the technology, not tail wagging the dog. That's what often happens. And I say this with the greatest respect to ICT, our colleagues in ICT. When they came with this on, they kind of thought they knew what we wanted. And they just put this in place and then they said, oh, okay, now you have to kind of adapt or die. I think, I agree with you, be very aware of the commercial, because especially in a university where we're struggling financially. I mean, I worked at UNISA, and I pray for UNISA, for the future of UNISA, because I mean, all the money is UNISA invested over many years in their technology platforms, and the failures, I mean, one can be honest, it's in the media that they've happened. Ask yourself what you could have done with those resources. So commercial versus the public good, I agree with you. Be cautious, be aware, and always have your antennas up when people try and pitch you something which is not in the interest of your students or in the interest of you or your universities. I like the idea of and because you see the problem in pre-COVID, even without technology, our relationship with students was just transactional. They signed up, they paid a fee, we gave them something, they're gone. Good night and God bless. Now, we need to look at the student more holistically. We need to find ways to prepare that person academically, but also to form that person as somebody who thinks logically, who kind of has a mindset that says, let me question, not have the answers. And that's where your research, I think it's important. I think the challenge with building our research capacity it's a national problem. I remember a number of you, when I was at WITS, we got these fantastic bursaries for engineering students from Rolls-Royce, fully paid bursaries for masters. We couldn't get students from disadvantaged back because they couldn't afford to study further. They needed to go and work. The reality is they needed to contribute to the family. So I think that's something, but if we can build this in from undergraduate level, where we look at the curriculum holistically, integrated, giving them tool sets that they can use even when they go into the workplace, even when they go into entrepreneurial space, analytical thinking, critical thinking. I think that's what you're onto. And if you end up with, hopefully out of your student pool, that decide to stay in academia and to advance there. Research, I think people just get overwhelmed by research. Say, oh, well, research is this difficult. We do it all the time. You know what I mean, as individuals. And I think a lot of the tools that are available can assist us. But I agree with you. I think two things. Be wary of the commercial dimension. And secondly, look at your students as whole people. I think the other, a colleague of ours in HELM, Denise Zinn, who is a former DVC at Teaching and Learning at Kawega, the Mandela University, she talks about humanizing pedagogies. Humanizing pedagogies. It's not an end in itself. It's about how through the pedagogy that you advance the humanity of that individual. And we all have a collective responsibility to do that. Thank you, colleague. That was a good question.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Seale, and a very empowering presentation that you've just shared with us. We really appreciate. Doc, I just want you to wear your leadership cap, which you enjoy most of the time. My question is really short. How do we leverage on the lessons learned from COVID to ensure that we don't lose sight of ensuring that we balance both technology and pedagogy as we move forward from where we are right now? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kumedi. I think why you're here today is what we should be doing. we should be reflecting, we should be talking, and we're capturing this. Because I think it's important, if you don't write up, you don't tell those stories, you will lose the value of the leadership lesson very quickly. I think what we're trying, and I think this is what we're advocating, and we could certainly assist MUT at the team level, at the executive level, at the middle management level, at the HOD level, around the collective shared experience, but also a repository of that knowledge. Because often people still tell stories, and I think Dr. Stoltenkamp, when she presents tomorrow in the workshop, she's got lots of anecdotes, a lot of the stories that happened in her university and how they talked about it and got through that. So I think certainly a leadership lesson is you've got to reflect, you've got to learn from that experience, and the way you learn from this is by capturing it. Somebody has to write up the story. Because as I'm saying, there's amazing experience, there's amazing opportunities in that collective and that shared experience, but also stories that will not be repeated because the conditions and the context is changing. So I think the creating perhaps internally also, Dr. Komedi, perhaps your own community of practice, and I know there's a lot of those around, but where people have an opportunity, and I think this summit can build up to it, but you could perhaps, for example, have monthly, brown bag lunches, where someone comes and talks at MUT, or maybe from DUT, or from Free State, or from Northwest, about an experience. I think that's important, but then you capture that. You retain, that becomes part of your knowledge repository. I think that's key. Knowledge is power, and especially in the leadership space, but it's not just knowledge by the few, but it's knowledge shared with everyone else.
Okay, we'll take one last question.
Thank you very much for that comment, Doctor. I just wanted to maybe share a brief experience with the comment that you made in terms of, technology taking the lead and so on behind or in front of pedagogy. I'm within the English studies area, and my argument is that, you cannot teach a language through a student just clicking enter, click, enter. How do you teach them academic writing skills? That's an example of a situation where the university where I was working was spending $1 million a year on this program, which I argued through my research that really it's just behaviorism. Click, enter, but are the students learning anything? I thought I would just share that experience. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the click generation. I hear you. I just think, colleagues, we talk about this all the time in HELM, and Rassi will know this when we do our Foundations of Leadership program. You own the academy. You're the expert. So you've got to find ways to make your university, keep on knocking at that door of the DVC, of the dean, to make sure that what you're doing is in the best interest of your students. So there's not a quick fix, or there's not a simple answer, but there's ways, and I think you need to push back. You know what I mean? Obviously based on evidence, because that's what you do, and you've already written it up. I think you just have, well, there you go. There you go. I think the take-home, colleagues, and I can't emphasize this enough, you can't argue in a university without evidence. You got to do your homework, folks. You got to go and just not say, oh, this is what I think. You got to go and find out what other people are doing, and then you say, as you typically would do in a research project, you say, okay, these are the scenarios. What do you think could work best for our university?
Okay, one
thank you very much for sharing.
Last question.
Thank you, Doc, for a wonderful presentation, even though we came in a bit late, but we were able to grasp some of the valuable information that you've presented. Mine is not much of a question, but it's a comment. I liked when you were displaying the strategy that you were, the last strategy that you presented there, where you one of the elements is digital literacy, and you are promoting a do-it-yourself strategy. And indeed, I'm an advocate of that because ever since we started in our institution using technology, we've been preaching do-it-yourself strategy, because if you rely on us as the academic support, what will happen if you're not there? That is one of the major things when you use technology. And also, it is not about technology, it's about learning. It's not about whatever the corporate are bringing to you. We don't want to lose the content and the context of what we are teaching. And that those are the emphasis that you are preaching here. And we know that our students are living in the digital world, and we can't shy away from that. The industry that we want to send the students, it's now technology driven.
Correct.
The entrepreneurship, it's technology driven. Marketing is technology driven. But it is upon us as academics to ensure that we make use of those technologies to enable what we are teaching. And you have emphasized also on that we must use technology as an enabler. So I want to comment on those just two aspects from your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, colleague. I think that's a really good way to wrap up the session. And I can't, my team's here, so I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for HELM. So you need to go to our website, very easy, www.helm.ac.za, and you'll see what we're doing, exciting stuff. So good to be here. Thank you very much again, Dr. Gumede and Dr. Makua, for the opportunity. Deeply appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, for your insightful engagement as well, and thank you once again, Doc. Dr. Gumede says more token of appreciation for you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Would you like to arm around?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Dr. Gumede and Dr. Seale. Colleagues, we are moving along just swiftly with the program. I think we're just 10 minutes behind. So thanks, Doc, for just like speaking through your presentation, just like that. Colleagues, to the stage we are going to invite one of our partners, especially in the EdTech space, One Connect. If I can just request the two colleagues to come through. They are, I'm sure those of us who use Blackboard, they would know them from that. But I do know that they do also support other educational technologies. So following that presentation by Dr. Seale, it might be just nice to hear basically what are the colleagues in the educational and technology space providing for us. Colleagues, Nobelungu and Kala. So you will excuse the bit of waiting game here. I can just share with you, we got them last minute. So I think this is a representation of that also. So while we're waiting, for those of us who came in late, we had announced that for you to get the full program, just go to our conference website. You will get the program there, and also the book of abstracts is available there. Should you pick up any issues that you might have with the program, Mr. Seale and myself are available to sort that out. So please do not mind to contact us if there's any issues that you see.
Good morning, colleagues. How are we all doing today? Good, good. So my name is Nobelu Litzuela. Feel free to call me Nobe. I know it's a mouthful. And I am the Regional Account Executive for One Connect in SADC. I see some familiar faces. I think I've been working with a number of you for some years now as your Blackboard account manager. Some might know me as their previous Turn-It-In account manager. So Carl and I equally have been in the space for some time. Today I'm joined by Carl, my colleague on the stage, who's going to be running a presentation for us. But I thought it would be great to just kick off with an introduction of who we are as One Connect. But firstly, also thank our colleagues from MUT, or our partners, rather, from MUT for inviting us to sponsor this conference, and also giving us an opportunity to speak at the conference. So we really appreciate that, even if it's last minute, right? So as One Connect Education, so those of you who might know One Connect, we service quite a lot of sectors, and we have an education department where we have built out an ecosystem of digital teaching and learning services, or digital teaching and learning technologies, and we partner with various OEMs to achieve that. So I'm going to mention a few of those. Some of you who are using Blackboard will know that Blackboard is no longer known as Blackboard and is now known as Anthology. And what that has brought with it is more capabilities to service more divisions within your institutions, right? So we now have a student information system. We also have a CRM, Constituent Relationship Management System. So we can then assist you in the journey of tracking those students from inquiry right through to alumni, right? And then we have the SIS managing all the necessary information of the students and tracking them along. And then of course the LMS, right, which is servicing your teaching and learning delivery. Today, Carl is going to showcase to you some of our newer solutions that we are very, very excited about. In specific, it's going to be our class virtual learning environment solution. So I'm going to shoot into a quick demo of that, respecting time and also not wanting to delay people from their tea time, right? But to also just give you a high-level overview of our other solutions, we do speak to proctoring solutions as well. We do speak to online assessment solutions as well. So we're going to be here for the rest of the conference. We're also very excited to be hosting you for the cocktail event tonight. So feel free to have a conversation with us about any of our solutions. Thank you.
As you can see, I can move this a little over. There you go. Everyone can hear me? Okay, so as Nolunga said, that we probably know was more for the LMS side of things, was a part of Anthology and Blackboard and Ultra. But today we're going to talk about synchronous technology, synchronous learning. So the asynchronous learning obviously does play a big part in our teaching and learning and our blended learning experience. But the future of synchronous learning, where is it going? So the need is sort of rising more and more. The question sort of shifted a little bit into how do we improve our synchronous learning platform because of the challenges we've experienced in the last couple of years. You'll find more need to engage with students or staff remotely. whether the staff is remote or the students is remote, or you yourself presenting the class is remote, we still need to engage with our students to give them a proper learning experience. So what you see here is an overview of how do we bring the virtual classroom or the actual classroom online. How do we give the same look and feel with the same functionality to instructors, to teachers, and how do we give them a good view of what their students are doing and what they can accomplish. So this is the overall layout. As you can see, I'm in the top left corner of your screen, and that's sort of my podium. That's where I speak from, that's where the main focus is. So all students would see the main instructor, and next to me I've got support instructors as well. So if we are multiple instructors teaching the same class, I can have my support available. We'll all be there, as you can see, on the podium with my instructors who are helping me. And then I have the view of my class, and even that view can be changed. So if this was a classroom, and I would view all of you as my students, this would be the front of the class, that would be the back of the class. Same way, I can rearrange my screen. As you can see, we have 3 in a row here. That's because of my laptop size. The bigger the screen, the more people you'll be able to fit in. There's a little arrow on the right-hand side, so I can go through my class, sort of looking at my class row by row and seeing what they're doing. I can also order my class. And for example, if I say, student X, can you please sit at the front of the class? I can make that happen in class, in the class platform as well. I can also rearrange my learners based on the activity. So if I have student Y, who's very vocal, and I would like to see student Y on my main screen, I can rearrange my classroom by participation, and I will see the top participants right at the top of my screen first. So it's the same concept of what you would do in a classroom, and that's only seating arrangements. So I'm not even at the tools yet. So just to let you know, here's some of the tools that are available. I just clicked on the teaching tools options. And just a quick run through, you can add a syllabus, assignments, assessments, surveys, polling. You can even jump straight into your learning management system from the platform. So usually what happens is from the learning management system, you would normally launch a virtual classroom. So we're doing things with vice versa as well. So you can now jump from your virtual classroom into your LMS, and everything would open within your virtual classroom. Everything stays there. So we don't jump around too much with that. Then we have our whiteboard, browsing the web, playing videos and files. So you would think to yourself, this is what I can do in a virtual conference solution in any case. But in that instances, you would probably find that you would need to share your entire screen, and then you would need to open your browser, and then you need to go to the browser, and then you need to add the video to the browser, etc. But with class technologies, everything happens inside of class. So if I, for example, want to launch my whiteboard, even the whiteboard has multiple functionalities. So what you would probably have seen in the past is that you have a whiteboard, you can write on the whiteboard, you can share a file, and you can highlight certain sections. But just imagine I handed out a piece of paper to everybody as a class, which is a physical class, and a pen for everybody. And I say, each one of you write down X, Y, Z, and do the formula, work out the answer. How do I give each one of my learners an individual piece of paper inside a virtual environment? So this is where class is quite good. It sort of took the whiteboard as you know it to the next level. So not only do we have the traditional group whiteboard, which I would control as the instructor, I can also have an individual whiteboard where everybody will have their own piece of paper, their own pen, and can do their own sort of population of that page for whatever activity we are doing. So if I launch, as you can see here, you will see individual whiteboards and group whiteboards. These are pre-populated. And also another thing about class is that you can pre-populate all your activities. So if I'm the instructor, I have a class on Friday. I can pre-populate my tests, upload my files, my videos, anything that I require, and then I can just jump between some of the functionality. So because of time, I can't jump into each and every one, but let's just launch one of the tools, which is an individual whiteboard. And then I can show you how it looks. So as I mentioned, everything happens within class. So as you can see right at the top here, I can still jump back to my classroom and I can jump to my whiteboard. It sort of opens as a tab in that browser field that everybody knows how to use. And now I have my own whiteboard, as you can see over there. If I want to present my own whiteboard to the rest of the class and show them what I'm seeing, all I can do is click on the present option. And if I wanted to present one of my other learners' whiteboards, I can just click on my menu and I can decide which learner I can use. Now this is a demo environment, so what I did was I set up multiple white pages for myself. So as you can see, it's all my name, but ideally you would see your student's name. So if I said Carl Francis number 4, see what they're doing. They're not really doing anything. Carl Francis number 3. So if I said, okay, number 3, let's see what you're doing there. And this is a bit small, so I'm just going to enlarge it. And as you can see, I just got my name, some items. So me as an instructor, I can see what this student number 3 is doing, but student number 3 won't necessarily be presented to the rest of the class. So if I wanted to show the rest of you what student number 3 is seeing, I can just present that to the rest of the class. Now everybody would see my screen. We have a couple of other tools that you are more accustomed to, for example, polling. So the way class innovates with polling is that you can decide if you want your results to display, what type of data do you want to see, and should the class see it as well. And so this is some of the tools that we have. And then also, just to jump a little bit to our management, we have our class management. Now with class, we can verify users. So you would probably be used to setting up meetings and sharing a link. So what happens if we do not want particular users within our class? They are not scheduled for this course, but the link was shared to other users. So we have what we call verification within class. So we can verify a user and we can unverify a user. Once a user is kicked off a particular session, they won't be able to get in, back into that particular session. So the one options, there's a couple, I'm going to just read it out. We have the class roster where we can invite our students to the class. We have our attendance register, our grade book, and our dashboard. So the dashboard is the one that I'm going to touch on in the management section. And the reason why I want to touch on that is because it has some analytics that you would probably find useful. It would give you a couple of averages. And we can also view the details of that averages. So I can just have a look. There's the semester average. And then we can also see some of the participation details as well. This can also be downloaded in CSV files or formats which you can import into another system. And I can look at the user details as well. So the user details actually gives me a little bit more insights. It tells me talk time and focus time. So the focus time is how much time they spend actually focusing within the class application, so they weren't jumping around to other applications. And our talk time is actually when someone raises their hand, you say, you may go ahead, and they speak. So that's also sort of remember in the beginning we sort of said we can rearrange by actions, so to say. It's one of the actions, and this is how we measure it. So for my first user, Anne, has 50 minutes of talk time, so that's a very active user in my class. So I can use that information to give her a grade as well. So we also have our own grade center within there, but this is just some of the innovations that we have with the class application. So I'm just going to jump out of there and jump back to our participants. We also have all the other tools that you are more familiar with. We have the chat, But we also have the ability to turn a user's video or mic on and off. So we can request for a user, if a user is speaking, we can say unmute. We can go through the list and click on unmute over there. And the user would be able to speak. We can also give a rating system, 1, 2, or 3 stars. So we can rate our users based on participation, for example. And then we can rearrange the users based on that star rating as well. Okay, just going to go into some more. And then we also have the ability to make users presenters, which will basically effectively move them to the top of the class. We can make them instructors, which move them to my instructor panel, or I can move them to the panel where I'm speaking by saying move to the podium, and now all the focus will be on that particular user. So if you want to give the floor to somebody else, there's a couple of the features that we have, but for the sake of time, I want to thank you all for the opportunity that you've given me to speak. If there is any other questions or you would like to engage in some discussions, I'm sure myself and Nove will be around to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Right there on the stage, we can allow just for 1 or 2 questions that you might have.
I like this idea a lot, in the sense that at least this facelessness, will be kept a little bit. But my problem is that are our students going to be willing to, see one another there on the platform? They keep quiet even when we don't see their faces. How much more now when, we actually see the faces? Otherwise, it's a brilliant idea. I really love it. But that's my question then. Are they going to participate? Because that's key in terms of online learning. Thank you.
Yeah. So the application wouldn't necessarily focus on interactions based on speaking alone. So you would find that some people would not want the mic and some people would not even want the camera on. But the tools, that's why the tools that we have available is a little bit more broad. So for that, I would recommend polling, or surveys to get some interaction, because engagement is very, very important, as everybody understands. So if you don't want, the students aren't inclined to speak, then I would recommend doing a quick poll. How are you feeling about this? The polls also can be set up beforehand, so you don't have to spend the time in your teaching time to set these things up, because now I want to set up a poll and I have to take 5 minutes and then I lose my students' concentration. So as you can see, I've got 3 polls set up over here: atoms, chemical bonds, and doing okay. So these are the 3 type of things that I foresaw before I set up my class. And if I want to launch that, all I have to do is go into my polling and launch it to the class, and then they can select. So now we get a sort of a reflection, a live reflection on what the students are actually doing. If we're not getting the talk time, we can actually see, are they paying attention to the screen, number 1, and then are they actively engaging in your class, number 2. So the chart would obviously come up and populate with bars, and you can set this to anything that you require, but that's one of the ways I would overcome the non-verbal challenge that we have with students online.
If I can add to that as well, sorry. One of the nice features about the application itself is that you also have the ability to see when students are not active because they are busy with something else, right? I think you might have seen there on one of Carl's presentations where there was a pair of eyes. So as soon as they open another browser that is not class, it tells you that they are not engaged. So you can then maybe perhaps point to them and ask a question, right? Or point to them and have them present in that sense to get engagement from them. So it's like a light proctoring layer to it.
Thank you so much for your presentation. As the previous speaker actually mentioned, this is an amazing tool that you've presented to us. But one of my major questions is how data heavy is this particular application? And remember, we rely a lot about connectivity. Can this be accessed offline as well as online? So those are the kind of hindrances that we might have with regards to using this application.
The application, how data heavy in terms of.
So it is, sorry, I missed a little bit of that, so thank you, Nove. For the data, it depends entirely on what you're sharing. So it can be, an average class would be about 300 megs to 700 megs, right? But if you're sharing video, that would consume a little bit more bandwidth, and depending on the animations of the video, it could consume a little bit more bandwidth. But 300 megs to 700 megs is your average class for an hour of class time. And then, as I mentioned, if you are sharing, for example, a whiteboard, a group whiteboard, and you're making drawings or picture, which is one image, it's not really moving around or anything like that, then it would probably tend to be the minimum, and the video would consume more of the data bandwidth. But that would probably, like I said, be around 300 to 400 megs for your instructor. And obviously, it would be per user. So it's the incoming bandwidth, mostly the utilization, which is going to be used. So for example, if I have all my students' screens on so that I can have a view of them, I would obviously just be, the bandwidth would be taken up just by that and my talk time. So that would be between 300 and 400. Again, depending on the tools that you're using. Very heavy video would probably take more, but you will probably see the file sizes of that video beforehand already. And then for the users, on the video side of things, just so that you know, as I mentioned, you can upload files and video. So most of the data would come from the instructor because they're uploading that video into class. And then they're playing that video. So the user's not downloading that video, they're just viewing it on the screen, which saves a little bit, but it's still a little bit on the heavy side as well. What I wanted to mention about the video, now that we're on the topic, is that you can also control the playback of the videos that you upload into class, or if it's a YouTube video that you're sharing. If you do use YouTube, for example, it would be a bit lighter on the data side than uploading an actual video. But we can control the playback settings as the instructor, meaning I can control where the user is. Either I can choose two options. I can either control where the user is within the video. So if I pause the video at minute number 1 because I want to explain, that video is paused for everybody. Also, the sound would be generated from each user's machine. So it's not like your sound would be need to be shared to all the users. So it generates from the machine in front of the user. And if I decide I want the users to control the playback, so there's a 5-minute video, the users can control where they are. So one user can be at minute 1, another user can be at minute 5, another user can be paused at minute 7. So they're all at different places with the same video that was shared. Sorry about that. I went a little bit over with the explanation with the data because we were on the topic, but yes.
And I think maybe to just give an answer to the offline functionality, because it's a synchronous solution, unfortunately poses a challenge with regards to accessing it offline.
Hi, thanks Carl for your presentation. You just said synchronous, so it doesn't help us offline, so we have so much of load shedding. I don't think this is going to be so ideal for us, but it sounds very interesting. I just had one question about the whiteboard. You said you can do it individually. You can only see the one person. So I know you didn't go through all the features, but does that happen with the sound as well? Say if you have 30 students and you want to just speak to 2 in a team because you're doing like one section with them or asking them a question and you don't want the others to hear. Is that available? No. It's just the whiteboard that we can work with.
So in terms of pulling students, like maybe 2 students or 3 students, and then having a conversation with them? Or do you want that projected to everybody?
So what I would do is I would actually use a breakout room for that particular item. So let me just go to my main screen. I don't really need to jump over there, but we got the breakout room. So this is sort of something that you'll be familiar with your teaching styles. You can break up into particular sections, and you can discuss whichever you want to discuss. So that would be one way to take users aside and to have a discussion with them. You can also schedule a separate session with them, and then we can also use the proctoring option. So we can, with the proctoring tool, have them on a call. So I'm just going to sort of invite one of my users and start the session with them over there. So with the proctoring tool, if we do have a one-on-one session and we do schedule a separate session with the users, we will see what the user is doing, and we'll see the user as well. So we can have that conversation, whether it be homework or an actual assessment that you are viewing or the students are doing. This would be one option. So we can either use the proctoring tool or the breakout room. Problem is we can't use both of those tools at the same time because they use similar resources. So to answer your question, that would be the 2 tools that I would recommend for those particular options. The breakout room, interestingly, also, you can have as many breakout rooms as you want, and you can have different users, either as individuals or as groups in that breakout room, and we can actually deploy various tools to that particular breakout room, and it doesn't have to be the same for all. So if I create 5 breakout rooms and I've got 1 user in each, which I'm dealing with one-on-one, I can post a whiteboard to the one, I can post an assessment to the other, I can play a video to the third, for example. So there's a bit of flexibility when it comes to breakout rooms and how we manage them and control them.
That was very insightful, colleagues. Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you. So, colleagues, that brings us to the end of the first day plenary session, and we're going to go and enjoy some tea and juice. So what we'll do after the break, or the tea break, which starting now up until 11:10, we'll go to the various sessions. This is just so that you know, if you see the program, this is Tugela room, right? So this would be session 1. And the room next door, it's Kongela and Umgeni. In the week we were corrected, it's not Umgeni, it's Umgeni. I didn't know that, right? There's no end there. So it's Kongela and Umgeni. So session 2 would be just next door, and session 1 will be right here. So we would convene at 11:10. Colleagues, enjoy the rest of your day and hope to see you in the cocktail network session. Thank you.